Morning, students, and happy Wednesday. So we are continuing on with charts and graphs, but today we are learning how to do picture graphs. So in this case, instead of using a circle graph to determine a schedule or a budget, this time we're using pictures to represent numbers so that we can more easily interpret different kinds of information. So for today, we have a chart that talks about bikes made by Street Bike Company. So this is like an example company, a company called Street Bike Company. And below, we have different pictures of little bikes on different years. But the most important piece of information on this chart is here. And this is why it is very, very important that before you start answering questions on a picture graph or any kind of graph, that you look at all of the information on the graph first, and you will understand why. So notice here that it says that each picture of a little bike represents 1,000 bikes. And that's so important because if you went and started doing your questions without seeing this piece of information, you might say that each bike equals 1. And if it says how many bikes were made in 1986, you might say 2 bikes because you didn't see all of the information. But after interpreting all of the information in the graph, we know that each picture of the bike equals 1,000 bikes. So we would know that no, in 1986 there weren't only 2 bikes made. That would be not likely. But we know that 2,000 bikes were made because each bike equals 1,000. So this is a great example of showing why it's important to interpret all of the numbers and all of the information before we start our questions. So using our simple bike graph, let's do samples 1 and 2 together. And of course, I'm always here for extra help. The first sample says how many bikes were made in 1990. So we're going to head to 1990 in our graph, and we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 bikes. But of course, not only 5 bikes were made in 1990, that wouldn't be right. Each bike represents 1,000, so it would be 5,000 bikes. See? So 5,000 bikes were made in 1990. Sample 2 says how many more bikes were made in 1987 than in 1986. So remember that how many more always equals subtraction because we need to figure out how many more bikes were made. So as usual, we're going to take a look at all of the information in our question and all of the numbers. So here we have 1987, 1986. We're going to look at them both. And we see that in 1986, 2,000 bikes were made. In 1987, 4,000 bikes were made. So how many more bikes were made in 1987? It's quite easy because it's only 4 and 2. So we know that 4 minus 2 is 2. But in this case, of course, it's 2,000 because each bike equals 1,000. So 2,000 more bikes were made in 1987 than in 1986. So notice how it's just a tad bit more challenging because you don't only just look really quickly at the graph, but you have to make sure that you multiply each by 1,000. But if you do that, the rest will be quite easy. And of course, you can let me know if you need small group or just a regular math session. Here for Wednesday, we are continuing with our quotation marks. This time, quotation marks for titles. Use quotation marks before and after the titles of short stories, poems, songs, chapters, articles, and any other parts of books, magazines, and newspapers. So if you're quoting parts of books, magazines, and newspapers, you're going to use quotations. And if you are naming titles, you're going to use quotations. So we have a bunch of examples here. But we have been over this a few times. So I'm going to go to look closely and then we'll do some examples. So look closely says you underline the title of a book, magazine, or newspaper, as we learned. You use quotation marks around the titles of things that you would find inside a book. So of the books and inside a book, magazine, or newspaper. And this is very important because you don't want to claim information that you find as your own. If you find information inside a book, magazine, or newspaper, then that is the property of the writer. So you want to make sure that you always use quotation marks so that you're letting the reader know that you got the information from somewhere else. So for think A, you're going to insert the needed quotation marks around the titles in these sentences. So as I always recommend, you're going to read these out loud because it always helps identify. Number 1 says, James Weldon Johnson describes Adam in his poem, The Creation. Well, it's capitalized and you can hear it at the end of the sentence. His poem, The Creation. So we just put our quotes, nothing else. You're going to do the same for numbers 2 through 10. Write B, you have 6 exercises in which you're going to write on notebook paper the sentences, and you're going to include each of the following titles and punctuate them. So remember, punctuating doesn't just mean the quotations, but also add any commas and any end marks. Period, exclamation point, and question. So you're going to write the title of a song and write it in a sentence with the correct marks, the title of a short story, the title of a poem, title of a chapter in your science text, the title of a magazine article, the title of a newspaper article. So everyone's answers may be different. You're going to find the names of these and then write your own creative sentence. Here for Wednesday, we have our vocabulary assignment for spelling. So apart from your definitions from your spelling dictionary, you also have some prefixes, roots, and suffixes up here, that will help you understand the meaning of the word. So as usual, you're just going to write your vocabulary words and then match your definitions, fill in your sentences, and then choose the best meaning in the multiple choice section. So, apart from using your definitions, you're going to use this table up top because notice that you have all of the meanings of the prefixes. So if you notice that your word has the prefix post, you know that that means after. If it has the prefix pre, it means before. DE means thoroughly. EX, out of, and then so on. The root script would mean to write. The root termin would mean to end. Continuing, ION would mean the state of. Ation also means the state of. Ate, ATE, means to make. So sometimes you don't even need to use your spelling dictionary. You can use the clues from the meanings of your affixes to complete your meanings and then include those words in your sentences. So just remember the pronunciations are postscript, prescription, determination, exterminate.